Oh. Hello and welcome to another episode of Rapidly Aging Technology. It's been a while since we've been last together, and I don't recall whether I spoke about the quad-core Pentium 4 machine and the issues that happened. Partway through like testing and doing other stuff, the video card that I got for it it stopped having video signal. Looks like it actually couldn't fit into the socket all the way. And after switching that out, it constantly has some sort of BIOS error, like a checksum error, but it's holding all its settings and nothing's changing. So it's not happy. Once you get past that error, it seems to work just fine. So I had to switch out a different video card, which is another one of those NVIDIA, I'm forgetting the name, the card that has two cards on it that we used initially tried to use to do quad-way 4-way SLI in the Dell machine. But while I'm figuring out that, and also I have some more fans to put in and a modern sound card, we are looking at something different. We're looking at the TTX daisy wheel printer. And this thing came, well, fully loaded to an extent, and then I added more to it. A daisy wheel printer is a type of impact printer that, well, more or less you could say is derived from typewriters, from electronic typewriters. And it came with its whole manual here, the TTX 1014. Now there is a review of this online, some digitized copy of like PC Magazine or something from about 1983, which is about when this is probably expected to have come out. And it's actually a very positive review. This was an inexpensive unit, so it didn't type as fast as some options you could have got, but it had all the normal features you'd expect. So we're going to go over it, but first, what is a daisy wheel printer? What makes it work? So it's called that because this is its type head, you could say. Now this particular one that's labeled, actually branded TTX, there's a feeding issue and it ended up losing some of its bits here, but it's still a good example of what we're doing. So if you look closely, not sure how well the camera will show it, but each of these, there we go, each of these is a character. So lowercase, uppercase, you got symbols, and all sorts of hoopla. And so when this is in the printer, when you want to type a particular character, or you send a message that it has to type a certain word or whatnot, it spins to have the right character up top. Then on the back, it gets slapped by, there's a little motor that has a bar that's kind of, vibrates in and out, which slaps a free-floating hammer, which then slaps these one at a time, which hit a carbon ribbon and impact that character on the paper. And they're sold, not only are they sold by different font types, so this one's Prestige Elite, but also by its pitch, characters per inch designation. This printer can do 10 characters per inch, 12, and 15. However, this machine is also so bloody old that there's no dedicated drivers for it, which means you have to use the Windows text-only driver. Now, the text-only driver, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but it's limited to what just kind of Windows has ready on hand, which is 10 characters per inch, 12, and 17. So that means, in effect, unless you do something special, this printer, you can only do 10 and 12 characters per inch. That's perfectly fine. So that's one of the limitations you're going to run into. Another thing that is bothersome about this printer is probably to save costs. They didn't put in a proper tractor feed mechanism. All they put in was kind of a free-floating tractor feed guide. So what happens is you load your paper onto there, and then you feed it in through the back. Not sure if you can see that. And so it goes down, and it gets pulled in by the rubber rollers. Now, back when this was new in the 80s, I suspect that probably wasn't too much of a problem. Now, even after using a rubber restorer to get the platen, I'm not sure it's platen or platen. I've heard both. I'm not sure which one is correct to call this the largest roller, which on typewriters is, it's spelled, it looks like platen, platen, whatever. Well, even after using rubber restorer and cleaning everything up, it doesn't have the grip that new rubber has, which means it had some issues feeding a tractor feed paper when I was using it. You probably get the first page through pretty good, and then moving on to the second, it starts slipping. Single feed paper, loaded one sheet at a time, is just fine. So before we get to the printer itself, because I am going to pull it out and take a closer look at it, even though, you know, I hate unplugging things and moving them because I'm lazy. We will go over some of the stuff we have. So it came with about 3 separate daisy wheels. One was installed, a standard, like an off-brand, a Prestige Elite. I think that one. It had this one off to the side, which I switched into it and worked just fine until had a bit of a feeding accident, which we'll go over. So it lost a few of its teeth, so it's unusable. If anyone runs into a TTX branded daisy wheel like this, feel free to comment on my video, because I would like to have some actual TTX branded daisy wheels. That would be good, I think. It also came with this one. You can see why they got it. It says Swintech TTX, but this actually will not work with this machine, and I'm going to show you why. So the main principle of why this won't work, well, there's a few things to keep in mind, is that this is a dumb machine. It does not know what you're putting in it. It does not know at all. If you change from a daisy wheel that's 10 cartridge prints to 12 or 12 to 10, it doesn't know. There's no way for it to tell. You have to switch dip switches on the back. So if you put on these separate type wheels, it's not going to know. I mean, you could probably fit them both on. The mounting mechanism is virtually identical, including the centering notch up at the top. It works just fine. However, let's look at we know one that's correct, and what's at the top, right above its centering notch. Let's see if you can even see that. It's actually a period. There we go, that's the angle. So it's got a period, it's got what, half a, what is that? Plus minus on one side, and the registered trademark, symbol on the other side of it. On this one, the centering hole is pointed to, what is that, colon? So you can see the issue. If you were to put this on, it would print, and it would print just happily, but the characters would not be what you wanted it to print. So this one was mislabeled, or TTX made, maybe they made a different version later on. So let's say you find one of these out in the wild, and it was apparently a more affordable option, being a little bit slower but having all the features you would need. Where could you find more daisy wheels? Well, you have to do a couple things. One is this seems to use the same wheel system as Nakajima. And I'm not sure if it's all, I don't think it's all Nakajimas, because some of them seem to have more cartridge style daisy wheels where the wheel has kind of a plastic housing that stays with it. But when you're looking for something like this, and whether it be this daisy wheel print or another, first figure out what brand generally seems to match up with it if it doesn't have a bunch for its own. And there's nothing much here. This one's another Prestige Elite. I got to back up because I got spooked when the one broke. This one's another, it's a Courier. This one's Script. Some of these were actually new in box. I've flipped the boxes around as I've been swapping them, but this one's Script. It's kind of a scripty font. Another Courier. In here is Courier Italics. So first you need to figure out what brands generally work with your daisy wheel. Then you need to look try to get close-up images of it to see that all the characters, or at least some main characters, are aligned appropriately based upon the centering notch. So, some word of warning for you. It also came with a brand new ribbon, which apparently Swintech uses, and I think I've seen this ribbon used for other typewriters and such too. As you saw, it also came with the manual, which we're going to look into, has some interesting things. Came with the warranty registration card, which is fun, and something else in there, which, of course, it doesn't really give me an address, which was annoying because I wanted to look up TTX, the company. The only thing I seem to be able to find now is a railroad, like a rail car company. It also came with, well, it's a Centronics only parallel printer cable. So we got the end, which you're probably familiar with as being the printer end, but the computer end, it's wrapped up in here, there's no point in taking it out, is the same. So this is definitely some early stuff. Modern parallel ports, well, I say modern with a grain of salt, usually have some fancy features and enhanced speed over the old ones. You can have all that you want, but this printer is not going to care about that or take that. So now let's pull it out, look at some of the things on it. We'll take a look at what the dip switches do. Not going to change them because it's set up pretty perfectly right now. So before I move it, we'll look at quickly at the front. We got TTX Teletext Daisy printer. I believe this company is very out of business unless they completely changed industries. So we have a power light, which will be red, and actually I'll just kick on the printer here. So the type head goes back to its original location. So power is red. On the camera it looks kind of pink, but it is just a very standard red. We have online, which is yellow, and ready, which is green, and alarm is presumably red. I haven't had an alarm issue yet. So there's a button to take it offline. When you do that, you can manually push the printhead around. You can do a line feed and form feed. So kind of inch by inch move the platen. Form feed, it assumes a standard roll of paper, a sheet of paper. So it'll roll it through. We have, of course, some measuring guides here, and for the single sheet feed, a feed guide. We have measurements, of course, on the rollers that hold the paper in place when it's on the top. And on this side, there's other kind of little things to kind of guide, do measurement and whatnot with, that it rotates independently of this. Like, you can change it, but it doesn't appear to be a setting. It just rotates and then follows with it'll then move with the roller, the plate, when it moves. So that's that part. This one lifts these out of the way and locks it open. When you're first loading it, you need to do that, otherwise it'll bunch up behind it. This one actually is a typewriter style feature. The rollers underneath the platen, it moves them out of the way so there's no grip anymore, and you can just pull a sheet out. So if you want to angrily pull a sheet out and crumple it up, that's what that's for. So it's good for loading and unloading. We also have a manual knob to put the paper in place, which you will need to use. This thing, as I said, is dumb. It doesn't know when there's no paper. If you try printing with no paper, it will happily print. If you say, let's say you have a 3-page document, you load in a single sheet, and you just press print, it will print through that first sheet, spit it out, and it'll just keep rolling, and it won't have, it assumes you're using continuous feed paper, because there is not enough time to insert another sheet. It won't roll it up far enough, and it'll just start printing. So if you're using single cut sheet paper, you need to use, you need to print 1 page at a time for this kind of thing. So now we're on ground level to get a closer view. I just love this. This era of technology had a lot of smoked, this smoked brown plastic. You don't see that much at all anymore. You might see like a gray plastic once in a while, but you don't see that kind of smoked brown. I do like it a lot. Once again, this is the tractor feed, just kind of roller guides. It is not powered. I tried a few configurations with these support rollers to try to make it work better. At first I put them on the sides because it seemed like the tractor feed was trying to get separated from the main paper. Actually putting them in the middle did a lot better because it spread the tug from the rollers over the whole paper, but it still lost some oomph. I'm hoping that maybe if I get this on a proper old-fashioned printer stand and have my box of continuous feed paper placed probably back and underneath, it'll lift out of the box easier, go over this paper hanger and feed in maybe better. That's a possibility. So there's hope for that yet. But in the meantime, I'm just using single cut, single pieces of paper. So let's crack her open here, lift up the hood. There is a little, my shoes of course, there is a little notch that kind of lines up with that. I don't know if it used to hold it down, but it definitely doesn't anymore. I also have two kind of rubber pads which are fairly low to try to keep this thing from vibrating. So here is the mechanism itself. So we have the carbon ribbon cartridge. So think of a clear plastic ribbon that has a layer of carbon on it, and when it slaps paper, that it comes off. We have the little motor that just kind of has a little part that slaps inside out and hits this free-floating hammer, which it was free-floating, but it sprung to go back, of course, and then it'll hit the little heads that will go in that notch there. Now, I don't know how well you can see it. So up at the top of this paper guide, this plastic paper guide that moves with the mechanism, you can see there's some tape there. So that either when I got it or after I got it, which I got this from the original owner. This is used by a man who he wrote his doctoral thesis on it. So when you see the print speed of this, you're gonna maybe feel for him. But I'm the second owner, and it's been kept in really great shape. Anyway, that broke. There's with a little split just in the middle, which doesn't actually impair most of the function, except when you loaded paper, it would slip up between those so that you'd have part of the paper on the rubber side and part of the paper sticking out here, which meant when it went over, it would rip it and tear it and clump it and awful things. Same thing if you put the paper down lower, hoping that it would just feed up or move over to try to get yourself closer to the top of the page. Problems. So I had to go in, and I actually removed it. There's two screws. These are a bugger to get to. It doesn't look so bad here, but you can't go in straight. You have to use a rubber, like a flexible screwdriver tool. Just shove it in here, and getting them undone isn't so bad. Putting this one back on, this side wasn't so bad. I could kind of hand feed it in and then get a screwdriver bit and manually hold it and kind of get it in a little bit more before I could get the flexible thing in. This one, this took me, probably felt like half an hour trying to just finagle it and get it in and try to use my other fingers to get a screw head in to tighten it down enough so that I can then slip this back on. Anyway, so I pulled it off and looped tape from underneath so that the underside is a smooth piece, and it has been feeding perfectly since then. It would be nice to get a replacement, but that is highly unlikely because I can't find any other TTX printer stuff on eBay. I think I've even looked up just generic TTX printer, particularly daisy wheel printers, not very many options. So, what do you do? And let's look here. We got, so the two, I'm going to call them guide bars, the things that the whole head assembly floats on, have been relubricated with 3-in-1 oil, driven by a metal cable that is, so you got a roller there, and the carriage is moved by, so we got a metal gear moving this big, what was that? Is it plastic? I can't quite tell. I don't want to touch give it a good touch because it is kind of oily. This bigger gear, which then drives the whole mechanism back and forth, it's also been lubricated, and it's working just fine. As you can see, this thing is capable of wide paper, but it has to be set that way. Right now, it just assumes standard width paper. I believe in Windows, if you told it was wider, it might actually communicate that message, even with the text-only driver. But it does, there's some quirks where it does seem to just assume standard paper. So this is the ribbon cartridge. We're going to push this up, which is going to lift up the wings here. These jostle up and down so that the print head uses both the top and bottom of the ribbon to get more characters out of it. And when we do that, this roller separates away and we just lift it up. And I'm doing this, one-handed and looking through a camera. As you can see, on carbon ribbons, the last thing you typed is still visible. So that is, it was kind of actually a security concern for typewriters and things of this era. Because if you could take this and extrapolate, okay, what order do these type, and it's like bottom top, or something like that, you could recreate what was typed. So if you had any confidential information, these were a problem. And this one is, looks like the roller in there, looks like it's almost out. Yep, because you can see there's a plastic thing there and there's not a whole lot going on. So we may have to crack open the new one while we're working on this. This one was thoroughly used when I got it. So we have the rest of the mechanism here. So this meshes with this bit here to turn the ribbon and pull it through. Of course, it's guided by these things. And we have, of course, the little motor here. And we got the rest of the mechanism. So what if we want to change the print head? So we put those back down, and then we have this. This just leverages it up. So now you get a better look of it. And then if you pull it back even farther, it spits it off. And you'll notice, see, there's that ring on here. That's coming off of some of even my new print heads. I suspect, and it's just a sticker. I'm not sure if it was meant to keep it from rubbing up against something in certain designs, or if it was meant to actually give these individual heads a little support to snap back better. But it doesn't seem to hurt performance to not have it. We have some of the metal ribbon guide there. So if we want to pop it off, I usually would do this two-handed, but that's the holding mechanism, and you can see that little nub in there is what meshes with the, I'm going to call it the centering hole, the thing that gives the leverage and tells it what's the starting point. So this is, I was using Courier Italics. I wish these actually had a demonstration, like, that the name was in the font that it had. You can see it. So you can kind of get a good look at it, especially in this lighting. For our demonstrations, I'm going to switch it back to a more traditional font, which is just your standard Courier, which is very typewriter-y. If you're trying to make something look like a typewriter, typically Courier is what you pick. Script, I'll show you Script, because Script's actually worth looking at. Here's Script, so you got kind of a cursive-y lettering. Let's go to the lowercase ones to show it off more. There you go. So I like Script a little bit. It's neat. But because I'm going to try to do some ASCII art, or at least print off some, I think a standard non-italicized font will give a more correct depiction based upon what the artist was trying to do. Before I continue, why should anyone be interested in this sort of thing? And or why should some company produce a modern version of it? This is all kind of my own opinion stuff, which you can thoroughly debate, but here's why I like this sort of thing, other than being a weirdo. I like typewriters. As you know, old members of the channel will know that I do have a typewriter. I have actually a few, and I do write letters to friends on them. And there's something special about impact printing, which typewriter does, and that is that you can feel the text. Now, if this is using an ink ribbon versus a carbon ribbon, there might be some slight imperfections in the letters, which actually is I kind of like aesthetically. It makes it look a little more aged and it feels a little more special. With the carbon, it's basically perfect. which is why this was a letter quality printer. Compared to dot matrix printers, this thing is great as far as quality. The print is so nice, I don't think a laser printer is necessarily beating it on the quality of the print. In every other category, it does. So I think these are nice for people who really want to write letters and make them special. So I'm going to put the Courier printhead on. So we just got to get it mounted, centered on the hole, and then there's that. And where am I? Ah, there we go. And then it just pops into place. We're just gonna put it back into battery, and then lift up the wings again, and put this back on. You want to get it kind of over those, and then line it up with the rest of the system. In particular, you want to make sure it matches up with the gear wheel underneath here. Otherwise, you'll have weird things where, you know, the roll starts to pile up over here. I've had that happen once. So everything feels good, and then lock it back into place. All right, so let's look at the back. See that foam? There's soundproofing in here, and it actually really hasn't deteriorated, even though it's gotten some oil and stuff on it over the years, and from my oiling, because these bars were pretty dry. Does it help? Well, you'll hear. Backside now. First aside, power switch, power plug, nothing really going on. And as I'm resettling, I got one of these really nice Belkin printer cables. Does it make a difference? Probably not, but it feels very solid. It just doesn't look very retro. So on the back, we just have its serial number and just some manufacturing stuff. Nothing too interesting, really. And then we have our serial. And this is an old 25-pin serial. And parallel port using the Centronics connector. Inside, they're kind of at a slightly awkward angle. We have dip switches. So 2 blocks over here. We have, I don't know if you can see in there, there's kind of like a blank section where you could put something. And then actually 2 blocks over here as well. One that's, you can reasonably see, and one that's kind of tucked away. Well, what do those do? So we're going to flip through the manual here. All the descriptions of the little bits and bobbles. It's really quite handy to have this, because some of the settings would have been kind of hard to figure out without actually having this guy. Printer life, 3 years at 50 million strokes. Wow. And print wheels should be, wow, okay. Type style, oh, these are their Orator, that sounds fun. It's their basic scripts that they would offer. All right, so here we're into the dip switch section. This is an overview of what the switches should be to get your factory settings. Your basic baud rate for, most of this deals with your serial. And lines per inch and characters per inch. But if you want to do other stuff, then you go find the individual tables. So for switch 2, if you want to change the baud rate to match up with your serial port, these are your options. Now currently I have it was actually set down like 300. So this guy had an old serial, not very fast serial port. I bumped it back up to a baud of 9600, which is what my serial ports run at, because I do have a serial card, though it doesn't really matter because I'm not using that. You have how to feed the line paper, switching out those, how to switch these things out, got the center shaft and the guide pin. Alright, dip switch 1. So this is for actually changing certain pinouts of your serial port, because some companies use proprietary, they use the same serial port, but they repinned it because they're weird. So there's that section. expanded on dip switch 2. So you got all your baud rate stuff, and you also have how many data bits. Are you doing parity? What's the parity bit? What's the stop bit? Dip switch 3, auto line feed. Enable or disable it. I'm not sure why you would disable it, because you want to go to the next line, or does that just mean like by sheet? So you'd have to load the sheet in, then it would do it and wouldn't go to the next sheet. Maybe I'll fiddle with that one myself at some point. I just like impression control. So right now it is on low, so it doesn't hit as hard as it could. Character pitch, it is set to 12 because that's what it's running, and line sprint it is set to the standard 6. Switch 4. Ribbon empty alarm is probably set to yes. That should be default. Why would I change that? Some of these things it doesn't really explain fully what they do. That's that. Okay, so we have some specialty control codes for things I don't fully understand. And it kind of describes what those codes like mean. This one is actually important. So, escape codes. If you want this to actually have some additional functions, you kind of have to understand these, but I don't know where to put them in. So, and if you go into your printer properties, so your printers and whatnot, and right-click into properties, and over in the advanced section, there's like a fonts section, and there's some lines and windows. Okay, so it'll just be like a blank box, and it says, enable underline, disable underline, enable bold, disable bold. And if you notice, sets bold print mode. There are these old escape printer codes to enable those things, because as it stands now, in Word, if you say underline, it doesn't underline. If you say bold, it doesn't bold. It just prints the text. And I've even changed the print processor from the default raw format to text. I've tried a few little things. I've tried putting these codes into those boxes in different formats. Escape space O, escape O, escape plus O, escape space plus space O, because it mentions using of the plus sign. Nothing seems to be doing it. So if you understand these and where to put them in and how to make them work, please tell me, because with the generic the text driver, I'm not getting a whole lot. Not getting a whole lot of help. So it talks about the pinout on the parallel. Also, one of these dip switches does set it to parallel mode, so it'll actually use the parallel port, which I do have it set. So that is that. Now let's actually see it run, because that's what you're really here for, right? All right. So what we have up in Microsoft Word 2000. Yes, I still use it on my Windows 7 machine, and I will use it for as long as I possibly can. I have an excerpt from of Lorem Ipsum, which is an excerpt from one of Cicero's works, and it's used commonly as a filler for print things. So it's been copied and pasted in, but as you can see, we've defaulted to Times New Roman and 12-point font, which is the standard in old versions of Word, before they moved to like Calibri or something awful. So we need to actually make that match what the printer understands. You can do this, but the formatting, it'll do weird things. It might run off the edge. It won't have spaces right. It doesn't like it. So Word, at least this version of Word, when you have a default printer set, it actually looks at the driver a bit and gives you options based upon it. So for example, on this machine, we're doing the text-only driver, so it only gives us 10, 12, and 17 characters print. Well, we're using a 12-point wheel, and it's set to 12 characters print, so let's do it. So, okay, so let's change it to kind of a general courier-ish font. But the font size, this is where it'll trick you up. We're still not right. The default for all these is actually 10. And when you do that, it actually matches up to what's going to be on the page. You got to make sure to change both of those when you do anything in your footers or headers or whatnot. I said footers and looked up. Headers and footers, you want to make sure they all match the proper device, font, characters print, and the default. There's only one font size option. If you leave it at 12, weird things, it just doesn't quite match up right. So we're doing 60 words here, because isn't it 60 words? 60 words per minute is a good typist? I believe that's right. So we have 60 words to print. So now we need to load the printer. So the instruction manual literally just says if you're using a single cut sheet, you'll load it like a typewriter because it's 1983 and you know what how to load a typewriter. So you set it. This is easier, I think, two-handed, but we have it with the paper guide, so it's basically at 0. And now I'm going to try to roll it in. I usually like to hold it to get it in there a bit. Okay, it's going. So it's going to roll up the top, and you want to basically line it up with the top there. That's good, and it'll spin it up a few times to give the top margin, and then you can lower this bar down. But you don't want to lower these down until it's up through. And it looks like it's a little canted off, but that's because the support's over here. It is actually even, which is nice. All right, so it did it. And so this is a standard courier font. Look at the quality there. It is excellent print quality, and dot matrix printers could try to approach it, but they never could quite get there. I think 24 pin and really high quality, a lot of work on their end can kind of get something fairly close, but this is why these were letter quality printers. Something that's been lost on us because laser printers can do pretty well too. And you can actually feel, because it's been imprinted, you can feel the text there. It's a nice effect. So that was 60 words. The way it typed, I'd say in many ways it typed like a fast typist. But what you noticed, I'm sure, is when it got to the end of the line, there was kind of a pause. And it kind of turn up and then start going backwards again. It is bi-directional. So we're going to redo this test, but I've put in, I've reduced most of the words. I put in a gap and then a gap there, so the second line starts here. And you're going to see, normally there seems to be an extra delay here, so I wanted to demonstrate that. Well, here we go again with the second test. Actually, that seemed to do better than it has before. So I believe, and then I just used the same sheet twice. I believe this printer doesn't have much of a buffer in it. That or its processor, because it does have a processor. It needs to figure out what position it needs to be when it starts printing the next line. It needs to load things in. I believe one of the ways they cut costs on it that slowed it down is when it gets to the end of the line, it has to either, you'll notice, it didn't show up, it will go, while it's printing, the ready light will be out. Once it gets to the end of the line, the ready light kicks back on. Then it turns off again when it starts moving again. I believe it's buffering about one line at a time, and has to talk to the computer to get the next bit next to a chunk of text, and has to recalculate where it needs to move the head at. Because in this situation, if you had a really optimized printer, when it gets so we had a full line of text, a gap, and then a line partway through, you'd think at the same time it starts to roll up, it would also start moving over to be lined up position at the same time. And it'd be fluid. You get to the end of the line, start immediately moving back. And those little gaps in time over like 50 pages would add up to make this a slower printer, but it also makes it feel slower. Because when it's typing on down a line, you might say, well, a modern printer can print faster than that. But while it's going, I have a hard time complaining with it. It's when you get to those gaps and when it just stops printing. Even though it's fairly short, it makes it feel slow. And if they would have, it would have, you know, notched that up a little bit, improved it there where there's fewer gaps in time. It was basically always moving, always getting ready to print things, always moving to position. You would have just a faster experience. So now we're going to load it again. And remember, when you load these things in, what's facing towards the back comes back up to be the front. So we've already printed on this sheet 2 times, top and bottom. So now we look at it, load it in, and roll it in. And let's lift that back up. So it's starting here. It'll probably move into whatever position makes sense. We're going to do something else now. All right, do we have any Star Trek fans? So I went to a website. It's the ASCII Art website. It's Christopher Johnson's ASCII Art. I keep saying ASCII, but it's ASCII, ASCII, ASCII Art. And he's got a lot of different, you know, things on the website that you can do. I'm not scrolling on the right thing. So they got fighters, they got faces. That one I started a bit last night. That's a lot of printing. But with this kind of printer, you cannot do graphics in the proper sense because you only have, you know, letters and symbols. But with this kind of thing, you can. So let's print this guy off, and we'll see what that looks like. This is also why I wanted to use a more basic font, because these kind of assume a basic font. So I'm going to start printing, and we're going to see as it moves. It's not ready. Ready again. Starts printing. Has some gaps as it thinks. What I love about this kind of artwork is at a distance, especially at the right angle, it looks very good. And when you get closer, if you get too close, it starts to fall apart. It starts to dissolve into itself because you start, I think your brain starts looking at the individual symbols and not the overall shape. But if you get it back far enough, it starts to pop a little more. So you can be creative with these things and you can be artistic, but you can't just, you know, take a picture off the internet and print it out, because that would probably do something to... What would happen? We have copied and pasted Captain Picard's face into Word to try to print him out. So I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll give it a go. Oh, it's trying. Oh. It just lost its mind. Let's see what Windows says. The document was sent to the printer. So that must be a... so the text-only driver must recognize that that is not text, and it just sent a blank sheet. Probably if you had text on here, it would just have a big gap there, and then it would type everywhere else. So, okay, well, that's a nice little safety mechanism. So you can't force it to try to figure out what to do there. I thought it might actually just blast out gibberish. But nope, it didn't print anything. For a future episode, I do want to discuss this printer. This is a Microline 1120, which I got on eBay open box for like, what was it, even half the price I normally go for? I think it was less than that. This is a modern 9-pin dot matrix printer. And it is an excellent printer. This will be a good comparison because they still make dot matrix printers. They still also make the 24-pin ones, which have higher resolution and look a lot nicer. This is worth discussing. It absolutely is worth it. I have just kind of piled over here on the TTX's box. Just get it out of the way while I was dinking around with this printer. But this will be coming up, and I'd like to take so we've done a 60-word test on the dot matrix. Excuse me, on the daisy wheel. I'd like to do a 60-word test on this using its NLQ, near letter quality courier font, which is an option. Windows recognizes this printer, loads up its driver, and loads in its default proprietary fonts, which has much higher performance on. So if you use one of these dot matrix printers and you have proper drivers, you want to use its fonts. It performs a lot better. But we'll do a comparison of near letter quality and letter quality, because I can hold on to this sheet that we did, and we can also put them side by side maybe and see what the time is. Before I finish up today, which I do hope you've enjoyed our little exploration and discussion of this printer, I want to talk about the art of letter writing itself. Now this is some fancy, it's basically resume paper. It's a heavy weight, it's a almond, so it's kind of a, how do I even describe this color? I don't know if the camera's going to show up. Ever so, the lighting isn't doing it justice, ever so slightly gray. It's kind of an off-white, but it's not a yellow off-white, and it's textured. Letter writing is lost art. And part of the things that makes letter writing special is when you take the time to make every aspect of it stand out. So use some fancier paper. This will last you a long time if you don't write very often. Using an unusual printing process. So maybe you have a daisy wheel printer, you have a typewriter, maybe you handwrite. Maybe you bring out your fountain pen and you get your cursive running again. I wasn't taught cursive until 5th grade. They waited that long, even though cursive is, you could say, for the English language, cursive was kind of our standard way that we write for, I don't know, centuries. And then we went to, you learn print first, and then they bring back cursive a little bit, but then you never use it, you learn print first, so you go back to print. My handwriting's terrible. And that's my own fault. I can't blame anyone else for that. But they don't really teach handwriting the way they used to. So this way of communicating, slower, but more personal, more memorable, is kind of lost. When I write letters to friends, they keep them. It's special. It's something that was in my hand that I touched. That I licked the envelope. I sealed it and I melted wax on it with a candle. I sealed it. I wrote on it with my pen, signing it. It went through an old 1920s printer. Or went through, typewriter, or went through a 1980s printer that hasn't been used for decades. It's something special that's out of the ordinary. So a text message or an email at the right time can definitely help someone. So if you got someone who needs, someone who needs your attention, they need to have that person who chimes in and says, "Hey, I hope you're having a good day." By all means, do it. I'm not discounting those. At the right time, those can be perfect. But there's something really special about taking the time to sit down, write, 1, 2, 3 pages, talking to a person, sealing it up in an envelope, putting it in the mail, having that little bit of travel time, and it showing up unexpected at their mailbox. Gosh darn air filter. Showing up unexpected at their mailbox. And something you put a lot of effort into. I recommend everyone give it a go. And you don't have to go out, the first few times, buy fancy paper. You don't have to find, a retro printer from the 80s because it's an impact printer. You don't have to do those things. You can definitely start with your basic printer, or just on handwritten, even on lined notebook paper. And I think you may come to find that people really do appreciate it, and you'll want to up your game so that your letters are always very memorable. There are also Telegram services, which I want to do a video on because Telegram still exists in 2 different forms. One's kind of the more follows the fast tradition, and one follows the aesthetic tradition that are out there. Those are also quite meaningful for people. When I was, let's be quite honest here. When you're dating, when I've, my ex-girlfriend, if I send her something in the mail, she loved it. And girls who I've, maybe let's say pursued or ended up making friendships all over the world, actually, they love getting something in the mail from me. It doesn't happen much anymore, so I'd recommend you do the same. Start small, and then maybe find an aspect of letter writing that is special to you. Maybe you just really like the paper. Oh. Maybe you like the printers. Maybe you like the maybe it's the fountain pen or the handwriting aspect of it. Fine, or the sealing in wax, getting a custom seal with your family crest. Whatever it is, maybe there's an aspect that stands out that you make your own, and maybe the rest you don't do everything. Maybe you just use a fancy envelope. It's meaningful, and I think printers like this TTX are one way to get into that. It gets your retro computer stuff taken care of, and it gives you this very unusual way to type to people. So you don't see these very often. eBay isn't full of them. You see a lot more dot matrix printers, which they're special in and of themselves. You can get some decent quality tractor paper. Anyway, I rambled long enough. Thanks for being with me on the channel today. I know I do not upload as much as I used to, and well, that's just kind of life, isn't it? I haven't completely abandoned the channel, as obviously I'm making this video. You need to do the bell option so you get notifications when I upload, because it's not going to happen very often. So if you really like my channel and really want to know when I upload, whether it be often or not often, hit the bell icon so that you'll get an email. Believe you me, it's not going to happen. I'm not uploading every day. I'm not going to fill your email box. So feel free to leave any questions or comments down below. I would love to know where to put those escape codes. As I mentioned before, in the printer properties, there's this font selection, and we got select this, bold on, bold off, and I've tried to put those commands in, and what basically happens is at most it will actually print the command I typed at the top of the paper and then just continue on as I normally did it. So that doesn't seem to do it. Printer commands doesn't seem to have much. Nothing really goes on in advanced, and there's no driver that's a better option. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you around the channel. That dot matrix printer I want to do a thing on. I want to talk about telegrams, and I want to do more work on the quad-core Pentium 4 machine. It's kind of in this weird limbo state, and which has kind of knocked the wind out, because that was this very special motherboard, and if there's something actually wrong with it, I've tried clearing the BIOS and everything, it's getting a bit upsetting because you can't find those very often, but it seems to function, so whatever. Anyway, have a great day. It's Columbus Day that I'm making it. Happy Columbus Day. And I will talk to you later. Bye.